Hello again. Thanks for tuning in to the Cropster podcast. I'm Nick Castellano here with my co-host and a Cropster co-founder, Norbert Niederhauser. Today we'll discuss the idea of the network in the coffee supply chain and develop a better understanding of technology's involvement when sharing information across the coffee supply chain from seed to cup. Cropster's cloud-based solution allows coffee professionals from around the world to manage, analyze, and share coffee data with trusted partners. Let's paint a picture for our listeners, Norbert, and that picture is the coffee supply chain. Let's try to create a visual of what the supply chain looks like, and maybe then explain where tech is involved in that part of the supply chain, or in each part of the supply chain, or in general. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, fantastic. I love pictures, and the coffee supply chain is a very colorful and very intriguing and complex one. So this is a good one. The coffee supply chain is really, really interesting because it, when first of all, we know it starts at the farm. If you want to go a little bit further back, it actually starts with a coffee tree and a coffee plantation or a coffee field, right? And from there, you have like different harvest processing methods. Then the coffee ends up at the farm. From there, the coffee goes further to a mill. After the mill, it goes to warehouses, or in between, it goes to warehouses for holding. After that, it goes to port to be shipped. If it's international, then it goes on a vessel. It arrives at an arrival port, another warehouse potentially, and then at the importer, it is then held or transported right away to the coffee roasters. There's warehouses involved again. Then they have the roasting process. We have blending processes. We have packaging processes, and then shipping to the end consumer and so forth. That's like we kind of more or less know that. But what sometimes, again, this is all this is not news, but it's really exciting to look at it.
Yeah.
That supply chain spans across continents. It spans across time zones, across cultures, across languages, and that makes it so complex.
And it spans across multiple months.
Oh, and it spans exactly. It's
That's
not
a huge thing.
not a real time supply chain, which is huge. Also a huge benefit, but can make everything quite messy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so that was a very visual picture in a way with words. So within where does tech lie in each of those parts of the supply chain? Where does it help improve that supply chain?
Yeah. So see, our approach from the beginning was we knew that the entire picture is quite complex, and we wanted to connect all the partners of that supply chain in a meaningful way, but really also found out if we would wait to have the network effect only there if all the partners join, it wouldn't really work, because it's so hard to have everybody at the same table on the same page joining such a network. So we created our system in a way. So we went back to the Romans, right? Divide and conquer, and said how can we divide the supply chain in meaningful bits and pieces, and then provide solutions to those bits and pieces, but still keep the option for connecting open, or actually incentivize and prepare for a connection. Which basically means, well, once the farm data is organized, once the production data is organized, have a way of sharing that information with your next supply chain partner. So it's ideally it would be traced through from start to beginning, but that's not always possible and not always the case. And again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of like mixing and blending happening. In depending if you're like if you're micro lot single origin, then it's of course very easy. But if you are more commercial quantities, like a full container load from a region, which then is part of a product blend, you suddenly have three countries and thousands of farmers who potentially participated in that product.
Yeah, and there's massive organizational implications in there as well.
Yeah, Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's not impossible, and especially for like for computer scientists and for IT guys like we are. We love complex networks.
Mm-hmm.
We love the internet. We love those things. We love databases. So it's not so much that the data cannot be structured and it cannot be dealt with. It's more than from a consumer side. So who can consume that data in a meaningful way? Who
Yeah.
can actually look at thousands of table entries and understand or read something which then becomes meaningful or becomes actionable.
Yeah.
So that is always the challenge. So it's not so much like can we manage the data? Absolutely. Can we make the data meaningful and like summarize it in a way so that people can capture it and make use of it? That is an art.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. I mean, so there's a ton I want to talk about on the tech side, but actually, let's take a step back and I want to hear a little bit about what's your ideal supply chain. This is for our listeners. This is a perspective from the tech mindset of coffee. Obviously, we'll get perspectives in the future from other industry professionals, but I want to hear from you. What is your ideal
Mhm.
supply chain? What does it look like? I mean, does it just stay in origin? How does coffee move?
Well, no, I mean, what is this? I think there is no. I wouldn't go so far to say there's an ideal supply chain. I would say I would come more from the perspective there is an ideal solution, which
Mm,
which allows information flow and connectivity amongst the supply chain. So it's we know it's complex. What I think is ideal is that every partner in that supply chain is willing to share. That
mm,
for me is a critical point. So if everybody has the desire to receive and share or send information, then you can have communication. So I always when I did my first presentations of Cropster, I presented the entire supply chains like it's really complex. Well, then we break it down into bits and pieces, and then we look at it. What is a supply chain? And ultimately, it's a communication network. It's
mm.
people talking to each other. And
Yep.
if and as I said, there's a different language we speak. Not only in terms of one speaks English, the other speaks Spanish or any other language. It's also the culture, what they mean with what they say, the way they grew up with, what is their background, and all that needs translation and or unification. And I'm a big fan of translation. I
Mm-hmm.
also like unification, of course, but unification can be very hard to achieve, and it could mean you're missing information. So not everything can be unified. With
Yeah.
unification, we all know that you get standard products, and standard products are not that exciting anymore. So to
Mm-hmm.
keep the edges rough is exciting, is interesting,
Yeah.
but keeping them also translated and keep the information flown, that is important, and that's the challenge. What is ideal? So everybody stays true to what they do, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody is willing and open to share.
Okay. I like that. I can get on with that. Especially
Yeah.
like as my age and generation get on with that as well. Especially with this like increasing movement of transparency and traceability. That's
Right.
a yeah, that's an easy one to get behind for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I know you've mentioned this to me in the past. When you first started Cropster, there was this idea or this vision to connect the supply chain, connect the network. You call it the network.
Mhm.
And right now we see the network being connected from farm to roaster with information being able to be presented to the consumer. But at the end of the day, maybe some people might disagree, but the consumer and the producer are two of the most important players in the supply chain. How how do we continue to use tech and involve tech to not just present that information to consumers, but have them be a part of that free flowing information. And let me explain a little bit more.
Mhm.
Right now, consumers are presented with information on coffee bags. They're presented with information on websites, but that's pretty much it. There's no softwares for consumers or no apps for consumers to be able to go in and log in and almost see, the coffee's journey and how it got to where. And there might be some out there, but I would say not enough. Where can tech further empower the consumer to be involved in that entire network? I hope that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely, it makes sense, and I think your explanation and your picture you have drawn here shows how complex and difficult it might be and can be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it really a tech problem? And I think half of it is, but we
Okay.
have technology for that. So we can stream information. We have the internet. We have we can have apps. That's all there. Um, but it also that's not all. It needs education too
Mm-hmm.
on both ends. As we all know, if you have information in an encrypted way, that
Okay.
information exists, but will anybody else be able to make use of it? Probably not, because it's encrypted. Only the ones who know the key can encrypt it. And that's the same thing for that communication between farmers and consumers. I had a very interesting experience several years ago. Someone went onto the farm, um, m- some coffee buyer, I believe, or some consumer who went to Colombia or to some Central America
Oh, nice.
and made some pictures and videos from the coffee lands. And I still remember that some of their interpretation of what was going on the farm was not exactly how the reality is. They were just
Okay.
looking at the farm from their very, let's say, Western, Northern perspective,
Mm-hmm.
but they were not able to speak the language. They were not long enough in the country or on the farm to really understand the processes. They were just seeing something, taking a picture, taking a video, and putting an interpretation on that. And I saw it. And first of all, I didn't like it because it was not the truth.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also thought, well, this is very interesting. This is exactly what can happen if you don't have enough background. You see something and you feel, oh, that must be it. And
Mm.
pictures are very powerful. And
Yeah.
our own mind is very powerful to compare those pictures with the pictures we have in our head from our education. That's where education comes in. It's so
Okay.
important that we learn to talk about what we see. It's like, what is going on in that picture? No, this is not a farm in Austria which operates under the same paradigms like I grew up with
Yeah.
30, 40 years ago and learned that this is how a farm works in Austria. A farm in Colombia works very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have to present those pictures. At the same time, it's not only responsibility of the consumer to do that, it's also responsibility of the farmer to understand their markets and their buyers.
Mm.
So how do their customers ultimately think about their product? What do they want to know? And what is their educational background? And if
Yeah.
that's done well, and we have seen some of the bigger specialty coffee brands,
Mm-hmm.
they understand that. They have international education. They have traveled. They have been here
Mm.
and they have been there. And
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly the points connect. The marketing message or the message the farmer sends connects to the consumer as does the consumer connect back.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is super, super complicated. It's a lot
Yeah.
of effort. And it's not
Absolutely.
only about technology to just technology is out there. I mean, we have databases.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not only about the amount of information accessible, it's also what we do with it.
Yeah.
And there's just again the technical concepts of the data, information, knowledge pyramid. which says, well, data is just it's just numbers basically.
Yeah.
And then you have that information and you say, well, there's a 1 and a 2, and then there's 2 dots, and then there's a 3 and a 0. And that's
Yeah.
like, oh, our information says, oh, it's probably a time, and it's probably 12:30.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go that next layer of like knowledge, and it's like, oh, and we know if it's 12:30 midday, this is lunchtime, and that means restaurants will be open, or we can take a break, or we can. So we link that to our experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fascinating. I can talk for
Yeah.
hours,
Yeah.
and I'm not an expert on that topic, but it's I reflect on those paradigms sometimes,
Yeah.
and I feel, oh, it's much more than just giving someone access to a data sheet full of farm or supply chain information.
Yeah. And it's super interesting you say that, because the other day I heard a conversation, and basically a main point of the conversation was, and this goes back to your point about the picture. There's a difference, if we're talking like on an industry coffee professional level, there's a difference of going to Origin just to cup and to get a marketing your to do your marketing thing or whatever, versus actually putting yourself in there and understanding what is actually happening at the farm, and at this farm, at this origin in particular, how is it different than other farms and other origins.
Mhm,
And I think diving that deep is one step to having an understanding of what happens at these origins, but also going back to the picture comment, it's also important because there's a power of, like, you said the picture and sharing that kind of information in that picture with other people, because it can also create either a very true narrative or a very false narrative of origin. And that is, if you're
mhm,
taking pictures of farmers or people looking sad, it creates this image that isn't true, that people then
mhm.
have a perception of origin, that like everything is sad and everybody's poor and they don't have a good life. And it's like, well, you're basing that off of one picture, right? Versus if people, like you said, if there was more education, had a deeper understanding of what is real, or I guess what is a true narrative, that obviously can change the perception of whether it's the consumer on origin or the producer on consuming markets. Um, it can have a massive impact for sure.
And that's true on so many levels. Just think about not a complex, complicated supply chain with an agricultural product. A lot of consumers do not know the details
Mm-hmm.
about. Just think about your neighborhood. I mean, there's so many people out there. They are living in the same cultural environment. They speak the same language, and we still have a hard time to connect because of our specific beliefs, or we don't really understand and know what's going on in that person's life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It happens so many times on the road, right? The road
Yeah.
is a fantastic example. Someone drives by and makes a false move, and the first thing is like, of course, that's a bad person, right? But there can
Mm-hmm.
be so many reasons for why that just happened. And are we
Mm-hmm.
really open to explore those reasons? And do we also have the time to explore those reasons? Because if we
Yeah.
feel threatened, our response is immediate. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the same thing with some pictures. They can be threatening, or they can relate to some experiences we have or had, and that causes a certain reaction. But taking the time, taking that step back, and thinking about it, I know we're going into a more philosophical maybe thing. Maybe
It's
I
all
should say,
good.
more with technology, but that is the, let's see, the kind of the limit of technology.
Mm-hmm.
It can help overcome certain borders,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to understand how that is. So see this now we have all those mass media access things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to understand that we live in certain bubbles. The information we get presented is related to other information we were interested to. This is not how the real world looks like. It might appear to us in a certain way, but it might not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
some of it is totally true. I mean, I'm not saying that there's only false information out there. I would say it's probably most information is good information, and
Mm-hmm.
always was, because
Yeah.
what now tells us what now the phone tells us
Mm-hmm.
before maybe our friends told us at high school, and they had their own vision and their own experience, right? Or our
Yeah.
parents or our friends or our neighbors, the supermarket we go to. It doesn't matter, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
always a certain filter,
Yeah.
and to overcome that filter and be open to a product. And again, coffee is fantastic because it's a very tangible product. It's not
Yep.
something you inhale it, you drink it, yeah? You absorb it, and
Yeah.
it becomes part of your
It gets
body.
the caffeine gets into your blood, literally.
Yes, exactly. And that is of course a very, very personal linkage to a product. So it is
Mm-hmm.
only understandable that we want to know more,
Mm-hmm.
and we're excited, and then take those opportunities and to bring those opportunities to the market, so that
Mm-hmm.
people who want to know more can either have guided tours, for example, where
Mm-hmm.
people who have traveled, have experience. uh, there's a lot of very, very good webinars out there. I'm really
Yeah.
excited, especially last year. A lot
Yeah.
of companies, like a lot of importers, they did webinars,
Mm-hmm.
super interesting webinars, where before they were bringing that content to their customers, and maybe sometimes they would receive a visitor, but not always. And it's now there's more people having access, learning
Mm-hmm.
more.
Mm-hmm.
And again, webinars, technology is not new.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that technology. So again, technology did not change it.
Yeah.
Technology enabled it.
Yeah. There you go. That's quote of the day. And
Yeah.
so like going on the webinar part then too, because obviously Cropster's done a ton of educational webinars on
Mhm.
multiple topics and just different interesting themes. But more specifically on a Cropster level, where does Cropster, we understand where Cropster is right now and in terms of like sharing information on a data level, but where is Cropster in 5-10 years in terms of evolving and continuing to be a part of sharing that information, but also sharing that information outside of, B2B borders, reaching the consumer as well, reaching the people who are drinking a cup a day.
Right, right. Those predictions are always extremely hard to say. It's like, where's Cropster
Mm-hmm.
now in 5 or 10 years? But I think it's an extension of what we have done the last 10 years. It
Mm.
is working with the industry, together with our partners, with our customers, um, to understand what needs are, what technology needs are, and then
Mm-hmm.
since so it is not only us pushing a product. This is people giving us feedback. This
Mm.
is hearing about needs, hearing about, hey, we want to connect. And if you can identify the technology part of it and say, well, this is a technology problem, then we can take it on and we can solve it, because that's what we're good at. That's what we know.
Yeah.
But it takes us actually a lot of time to connect with industry players, with the market, let's say, and
Mm-hmm.
understand those needs, because it's also not possible to just fulfill the need of one specific person. And again, there's fantastic ideas out there en
Mm-hmm.
masse. So we're not short of ideas what could be done.
Yeah.
The question is, what is most impactful and what is most needed, and what has also the highest chance of success, so that people are actually taking this up, using it, and creating better lives, creating a better environment. So we work a lot on that. So our product
Mm-hmm.
managers are constantly talking, reviewing, reflecting.
Mm.
The part of then putting and again, I don't want to downplay what we do in terms of technology, and we have outstanding programmers and a really, really good team of um, on the technology side, because it is not trivial. But in the end of the day, if they really clearly understand what is needed, they
Mm-hmm.
can put those lines of code into exactly the right places, and
Mm.
make it very impactful.
Yeah.
If it's not very clear what is actually the outcome, what should be the desired change, and that could be the interface, that could be the functionality, that could be the workflow, that could be how information is interpreted, how it's calculated, then you're always a little bit further from an ideal goal. And so where will we be? I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure, and we've done it in the past. We've started with the farmer. Then it was very hard to make into a product. So we moved up the supply chain, or down, however you want to design the supply chain, right?
Yeah.
I basically do the coffee roaster, and that really became a bigger success. And then through coffee roasters, traders would follow, and through traders, farmers would follow. And so it's a more complex dynamic now.
Yeah.
And we can serve on more nodes of the supply chain.
Yeah, and I think now pretty soon the cafe product, which is on the website, that's going to be another step towards just connecting more of supply chain beyond the roaster, and even getting closer to reaching the consumer.
Right.
Maybe you can speak on that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So see that the roaster ultimately represents the one who prepares coffee. So they have in mind I would say the barista, and surely also they are the final customers in a certain sense. But it might be, if the roaster has no cafe, it's a little bit harder. But the barista is the, let's say, extension of the coffee drinker. They know very well how to prepare a certain drink so that it's very enjoyable, and it has a certain consistency or effect on the consumer. So by taking that step of going into the cafes, we allow more information flowing. We allow more control for that specific part of the supply chain. Again, it's built as a node, as its own product, which then can be connected back or forth into the supply chain.
Yeah.
And I think it will not end there. I mean, that's another step in the supply chain. We understand that. We know that.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I can't speak for other industry professionals, but for me, I sometimes forget, for example, the barista is the last face the customer sees before they have their coffee. And so it's something like cafe, for example, and at least allowing that information to be flowed even further to the barista. That is essentially the person in the cafe who's going to be making that presentation and sharing that information in the cafe with the consumer. It's not going to be the production roaster in the back, and it's not going to be the green coffee buyer out in Colombia. It's the barista. And I feel like, at least in the US, that can be a massive step forward for baristas to not just have an understanding on theory extraction and how to manage a cafe workflow. It's going to take a step further into baristas allowing, or at least baristas empowering baristas to share information beyond the cafe setting and beyond the roaster setting, share information from origin and from what they're learning.
Yes, and so see, that's some cafes do that already very well.
Okay.
You step in there, you have already certain marketing materials available to you. If you don't have time, you can still read a little bit. But if you have a little bit more time or have a specific question, and it's not about really explaining all the details, but sometimes you just want to know, hey, where's your espresso? Where does your espresso come from? And if you get a solid answer, it's like, oh yeah, this is a Colombian wheeler, and it has those taste notes. And we just got it fresh in, and it's about two weeks in our warehouse now, and it was harvested 6 weeks ago. I mean, that blows my mind, right? If I would know that. It's not that I get that precise information right now, especially in terms of like, when was it harvested, when was it roasted? That's still not so much available. But in terms of flavor notes and where it comes from, yes.
Okay.
And then if the barista can guide me, it's like, well, I feel something fruity today. What can you? It's like, go for this product. It's like, oh yes, please.
Well,
and
yeah,
if my experience relates to what I was just ordering, I'm just a happier person. I got what I wanted, what I felt like, and
Absolutely.
I can connect even more. It's not just coffee anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's also an important part too, is empowering the barista to be precise and concise, because sometimes too much information is always not good for the consumer. Sometimes the consumer doesn't want to just get bombarded with information. Some they just want to know, hey, what's the origin? What are the flavor notes? And I think uh, being able to present that information in a concise way, but not overloading
Yeah.
that kind of presentation is also very important, because it can also scare people away, which we don't want as well.
I think it's an art to start with like more higher level information, and then kind of see if that person wants to go a little bit deeper, but do not start too light so that the other person is turned off by like, oh, he does know nothing, or it's like, oh, this is too like, oh yeah, this is coffee, I know it's coffee, thank you. um can you give me a little bit more than that? And I kind of know, and I suspect that there's caffeine in it, so no real need to speak about that, right?
Yeah.
And again, we speak to those cafes, we speak to those customers, and they say, well, and we know it's insane training effort to get every barista the right information, to get everybody. And this information changes so quickly. So coffees are there for, I don't know, a month, maybe two, and then the next coffee comes. So it needs to be constantly updated. That's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Again, here, whenever I hear like a lot of effort, changing information, making it easier, I hear technology. That's what
Yeah.
we can do. That's what technology
Yeah.
can do very well. Bring structured information in an updated way and in an accurate way to people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So the supply chain, to me, never isn't was a chain. That's too simple. It's always a
Yeah.
network.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at what supply chains are closer to a chain picture, it's really on the fully vertically integrated supply chains.
Mm.
And that means that there's one owner usually who has a farm, imports, exports, or exports, imports their own coffee, roasts their own coffee, and they really control end to end.
Mm-hmm.
And those are great examples for how information can be presented, how information can flow. Of course, there's a lot of trust. It's one company, it's one body who controls everything.
Yeah, basically.
Um, and that's where you can get a lot more transparency and a lot more connection. However, it's only a reality in rare cases.
Yeah.
And so we have to bring that network picture again into our heads. It's a reality, and it's also desired to have coffees from different countries available in a roastery. So they need
Mm-hmm.
to go to different buyers or to different suppliers.
Yeah.
And it's also a reality that a coffee farmer usually tries to sell to different people
Yeah.
in the supply chain. And that's not only so that the reason is because of production quantity, but also production quality.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody looks for the same piece of the cut. It's the same way when you cut up a pig, right? It's not everybody wants to buy the ribs, and
Yeah.
not everybody wants to buy the tail. It's there's specific buyers for specific parts of it, and
Yeah.
that's also reality on a coffee farm. That not all coffee homogeneously it turns out homogeneously beautiful and perfect grade, right? So
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
there. Mhm.
Yeah. And that's really interesting you say that too, because that's why, origin or not just origin producing markets, but origin consuming markets have always fascinated me as well, because when we speak on vertical integration, there's more ability there to have entire control of the supply chain. I won't name names, but there's a lot of people across Latin America that I know, for example, that own the farm, own the roastery, they have their own trading businesses, they own the cafe, and they own, well, essentially their own roasted brand as well. So from
Mhm.
seed to cup, they have entire full control. They know every process, every step of the way. They can explain that, and they can talk about it, and they can show it. And the best part is the coffees they're serving in the cafe, those coffees come only a few hours away from the south or the north or wherever outside in the countryside. And all of that is within proximity wherever they're based. And that's something that fascinates me, because here in the States, we don't grow coffee here, unless you're maybe someone in California,
In Hawaii.
or Hawaii. Yeah. Um, but we don't have that ability to be able to just go to a farm 2 hours away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now, No, absolutely. And that's that always fascinated me at origin countries. And always, so again, 2003, there was not a lot of local specialty coffee at origin. That
Mm-hmm.
has fundamentally changed. So now you have specialty coffee, specialty cafes, specialty coffee offerings, even online. And that connection, those those roasters they can make with their farmers is totally different
Mm-hmm.
because of the like there's no language barrier, there's less cultural barrier, they're closer. Of course, trading ways are super close. I mean, the coffee could be harvested on day one, on day 10 it could be already brewed,
Mm-hmm.
and in a coffee shop it's like it's the freshest you can ever have.
Yeah.
It is. And I still remember very vividly when I went once to Mexico City. One of our friends has a cafe there, and he said, "Hey, I will pull you a few shots if you're interested, to give you a few ideas of what Mexican coffee looks like." And it's like, yeah, it would be nice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was initially sort of like this would be nice was absolutely mind blowing. Like, I got the freshest coffees, the most tasteful coffees, the most different coffees, and it's like, and those are all Mexican? It's like, yeah, they all come like from the farms. We just got those in,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, that's such an experience and such a pleasure, which is unique to origin countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fresh harvest, fresh
And
crop, fresh roast, fresh brew, all there.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
that's and not even just like on, let's say, like developing the local experience specialty coffee in origin, but also if we're talking about the network and people here in the States or in Europe who do end up traveling to origin, Medellin is a good example. There's a thriving, I would say, specialty coffee culture there. And those people now, when they get to travel to Colombia or Medellin, but not necessarily have the connections to be able to go to the countryside and see a coffee farm, they at least have access to coffee shops and cafes and different brands in Medellin or in Bogota or wherever, big city, to go to those coffee shops and learn from those coffee shops that also have direct access, and not even just direct access, but direct ownership to the farms. I feel like there's so much opportunity to develop, you know, help develop the understanding of people here in the US when they get to travel to origin, if,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, totally, and it's again, it goes both ways. So if someone travels from here to there and experiences the local products in a specific way, it changes their uh, perspective. It changes the way they have seen that product.
Mm-hmm.
They will see Colombian coffees now differently. They understand a little bit more, so they connect. They're
Mm-hmm.
closer. And the
Yeah.
same happens for, of course, the producers, as they can interact and connect to those type of customers. They don't have to travel thousands of miles. They have them in their own country, in their own environment, which also brings them closer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's super exciting. What And we know that from experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The ones who have traveled know how exciting it is to try out local products, because it is fresh, it's different.
Absolutely.
And technology can only help so far to bridge that experience. And I think it's more an after, um, I don't know, to keep that experience alive, to keep that connection alive,
Mm-hmm.
and to keep access alive to information. um, one example to me is in business. I like to meet the person I'm doing business with at least once,
Mm-hmm.
and that first interaction can be a coffee. It's not so important to really do the business deal in person,
Mm-hmm.
but to connect, right? And if there's
Yeah.
a connection, after that, I know how to read those emails, how to read those Skype messages, or whatever. It's about that personal connection, and then technology keeps it alive.
Yeah, and that's a good wrap to it because obviously, so it seems like in order to be able to connect both ends of the supply chain and create the network, it's the ability to present correct me if I'm wrong, free flowing information, but in a precise and correct way, which I think is the overarching importance of, the network essentially in coffee.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so many more aspects we can then look into, how to verify information along a supply chain, how to make sure that things stay accurate and trust, create those trust levels needed. All very, very complex and interesting topics too, of course.
Yeah.
And they all go with the same, with that same back to like, what is the ideal supply chain? Well,
yeah,
you have that willingness and that openness to share.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing that information, Norbert. That was awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's always my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cropster podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe to our channel to always get the latest episode. If you're interested in more educational content on all things coffee and tech, be sure to head to cropster.com/learn or visit our YouTube channel. Cheers to more coffee.